Since this movie officially premiered yesterday, I won't have any real spoilers in this review. Most of my review will be mainly focused on the premise and themes of the story and Batman as a character overall, so no need to panic coming into this. Before we start in earnest, there is one thing I would like to go over. Over the past several years, there has been a lot of online discourse surrounding Batman and Bruce Wayne. Most of it is regarding the systemic change Bruce Wayne could create, and the symptom-oriented approach the Batman provides by engaging in the outputs of a failed city, not its inputs. Essentially, Batman likes to beat up poor people. Well, I would like to inform you that not only is your statement unoriginal, it is also wrong. Please enjoy the following exhibits of Bruce Wayne giving to the impoverished, Bruce Wayne supporting free healthcare, Batman being friendly with and supporting sex workers, Batman seeing impoverished people forced to turn to crime as people, keeping tabs on them to make sure they're on the right path, Bruce acknowledging poverty and it being the cause of crime, as well as the need to end poverty, Batman supporting low-income housing, Batman able to talk down even a supervillain, not always resorting to violence, even for his worst offenders, Bruce again supporting affordable housing, and finally, Batman not just being a vigilante, but being a hero someone needs in a dark moment in their lives. Hopefully that is enough to lay those uninformed tapes to rest for the remainder of this review.
This is a world you never understand, and you always fear. What you don't understand.
One night's not gonna make any difference.
One night always makes the difference. Alfred, who do you see when you're looking? The boy whose shoes you used to tie every morning? Well, you are here tonight. I am out there. The only thing between the innocent and the predatory.
Be.
No, not may be. I am. When the mugger or the thief stops to think twice, that is fear. That is what I am. I am the reason the criminals breathe easier when the sun rises.
Ready for the next round?
Always.
What?
I'll never let you win.
What the hell are you?
I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman.
Gotham City felt real and tangible for the first time since 2005, and not just because I had a non-consensual immersive experience on my way to the theater on March 1st either. The Batman was everything I wanted it to be. It was immersive, creative, captivating, engaging. Robert Pattinson was a presence on the screen, and everyone knocked their roles out of the park. Paul Dano was a disturbed, effective version of the Riddler out for blood. Colin Farrell was unrecognizable, disappearing into a conniving mobster who calls himself the Penguin while you believe every minute of it. Gordon, Alfred, and Catwoman all play off Batman beautifully and feel real enough that you'd believe they existed outside of these 3 hours. Gotham City is a living, breathing thing with citizens and a geography for you to understand and immerse yourself in. There are locations for you to get lost in, and dark alleys to disappear inside of. I saw Batman Begins when I was 6 years old at an IMAX theater in Atlantic City, and the memory is seared into my brain. There I was, barely tall enough to be seen between the armrests of the chairs, watching some thugs in the narrows of Gotham get terrorized by this icon I spent the last 3 years of my life watching. The theater was shaking as this shadowy creature demolished a dozen mobsters. Then he rips the crime lord Carmine Falcone out of his car and says,
I'm Batman.
Before knocking his ass out and chaining him up to a spotlight to act as a makeshift signal. How cool is that? If I knew what fainting was back at that age, I probably would have fainted. As a kid, I lived and breathed Batman. I would watch the Batman animated series while I was in daycare, and at home, I'd watch it again with my parents, forcing them to watch with me. Justice League cartoons at night, toys, video games, you name it, I consumed it. I was a capitalist wet dream when it came to anything related to Batman. And holy hell did I love Batman Begins. I still do. I still go back to it and appreciate such an amazing interpretation of the Caped Crusader, one that laid the groundwork for the Dark Knight, one that made me so attached to this character. Attached enough so that nearly 17 years later, I'm spending my entire week consuming any Batman media I can, hyping myself up for March 1st when I go to pay extra money just to see this movie a few days early. And damn, I feel it really lived up to the hype that I threw into it. Now, for the past few months, everyone online has been saying that the Batman will be a detective story, a story inspired by the Long Halloween comic book, close to something like Zodiac or Seven. And everyone is entirely correct. It's not a pure mystery. Hell, the trailers tell you it's the Riddler behind the murders. But it's all about how the Batman unravels this mystery. How does he solve a problem that he can't punch his way out of? What is there to the Dark Knight beyond a man who's lost what he cherished the most? The Riddler and the conspiracy of Gotham City that he unravels along the way perfectly expose Bruce to this question and force him to confront everything he believes in. Since the time he was 8 years old in Crime Alley, this version of Bruce Wayne has had his entire life to be a product of his lowest, worst moment. His worst memory haunts him every moment he lies awake and every time he puts on his cowl. And every night he goes out into Gotham City, ready to give out that same pain and suffering to anyone who might dare do that to another child. Certainly he wants to change Gotham City, to save it from devouring itself from the inside, but after 2 years, Bruce admits that he's failing. There's no real measurable difference in his eyes. Crime is up, drugs are littering the streets, the presence of the Batman is without any systemic impact. But Bruce doesn't care. All he is concerned with is throwing himself headfirst into his reckless crusade. He's hoping to take down this criminal element in Gotham, and he couldn't care less if he dies along with it. He tries to reassemble the pieces of his broken city by smashing them together, without a care for the collateral damage it could bring to him or anyone else along the way. Bruce doesn't care if he lives to see the sunrise. He doesn't fear death, and all he has is his unending mission. He can barely even communicate with Alfred. Bruce is a broken man, each night going out more bruised than the last, hoping to find something out there to fix him, as he crumbles more and more with each passing moment. This singular pursuit isolates him completely from the world, from his only father figure, all in hopes of achieving a goal he knows he can never reach, because it's better than what he knows to be his alternative. Better than watching the same misery and trauma he experienced put onto anyone else. Better than even thinking there is the slightest chance that it could have been prevented had Bruce acted differently that night or any other night, because one night always makes a difference, always to someone. Not to the criminals or the mob bosses running Gotham like it's their playground, but to the victims and survivors who are just one wrong turn down an alley away from a lifetime of suffering. Deep down, Bruce knows this, and slowly he learns not just to fight against the rot that drowns Gotham of its life, but for the hopeful and innocent who can lift the city above the tides of corruption. And it's the Riddler and the puzzle he presents to Bruce that show him this. Now, this hero of Gotham is a far cry from the Bruce we see in the Batman, but that's the point. Bruce is angry, he's driven by vengeance. He wants nothing more than to harm those people who might do harm to others. He doesn't care for proactive solutions, and Bruce Wayne is practically non-existent at this stage of his life. But the Batman is a failure alone. The film makes a point of this time and time again. No man is an island, no man can single-handedly uproot the issues plaguing Gotham. But Bruce needs to course correct from his self-destructive path before he can see this. And to do that, he needs the events that take place in the Batman. This is his crucible. Every character in this film helps Bruce open his eyes to the reality of Gotham City and his place in it. The Riddler most of all. Carving up and slaughtering any corrupt official or dirty cop in the city, Riddler is a dark, sadistic reflection of the Batman. One of them targets the elites, the privileged few who have real power and influence in Gotham City. And in a way, it works. Without the Riddler, Batman continues his endless crusade against isolated incidents, unaware of the larger threat. Unconcerned with men like the Penguin or Carmine Falcone, the people who drag Gotham down in the mud and keep it pressed under their boot. It takes this brutal string of killings to give Bruce some clarity. Paul Dano's raving, maniacal, and psychotic interpretation of the Riddler provide a mirror to Bruce, a looking glass into something he can be completely consumed by if this crusade continues to be his entire identity. Now forced into this hidden underbelly of Gotham, Bruce finds himself meeting Selina Kyle, a woman of her own making, once again forcing Bruce to adopt another perspective. They ally in an attempt to stop the Riddler's grisly spree of killings, each with their own purpose and motivations in mind. Through Selina, Bruce is able to more directly see the influence that the men who run Gotham have over its average and above-average citizens. The difference between turning to crime to survive and organizing murders, intimidations, and scandals to line pockets and keep control. As they descend deeper and deeper into the conspiracy together, Bruce and Selina find what will really be needed to give the city a fighting chance, and what lines they're willing to cross to meet those needs. The Riddler is willing to maim, murder, and massacre his way through Gotham, but the Bat and the Cat are not willing to cross that line. Bankrupting his own soul is not a way that Bruce is willing to change Gotham, because he is not the same as the Riddler, not a killer, not someone to take away or tear apart a family forever, certainly not after what happened to his family when it was broken apart in Crime Alley, because everyone, even the lowest of the low, have a family or someone that cares about them. Even Carmine Falcone, the man seemingly at the center of all organized crime in Gotham. This old-school mobster who has a hold on nearly every cop in the city. The mobster Bruce's father saved decades ago on an operating table. A memory and an action that haunts Bruce and his family legacy. Falcone slowly grows to represent everything Bruce hates about Gotham, everything wrong with the city. He is charmingly sinister in his operations, and as is his right hand, the Penguin. Both are beyond Batman's reach, preventing him from making any real change. As Bruce unravels the Riddler's puzzles and clues, he tries to grasp at anything he can to get a shot at taking these two down. He is still consumed by this need to take vengeance, to fight and to inspire fear in those who might harm the city. He will not let up. The deeper Bruce dives into this investigation, the further he isolates himself. His need to fight pushes away his only tether to his life, the ever-loyal Alfred. The man who raised him is watching Bruce nearly kill himself night after night as he tries to save the city, unable to save Bruce from itself. Andy Serkis gives us a younger Alfred, one trying to be more involved and more protective of the boy he had raised. Their relationship is strained, cracking from 2 years of suicide missions without reprieve. Alfred wants more for Bruce, a better life, but can't seem to get Bruce to step out of the shadows. He needs to break through to someone he sees as his own son before it's too late. He needs to find anything he can to connect with the shell known as Bruce Wayne. The Bruce Wayne who is so laser-focused on being the Batman that he can't provide for Gotham. The Bruce Wayne who only makes an appearance in the light of day if it serves to advance his investigations as the Bat. The Bruce Wayne completely withering before Alfred's eyes. Not even the Batman's closest colleague, Lieutenant James Gordon, can seem to keep Bruce from diving further down. At odds as much as they're together, it seems like Bruce wants himself to rot away completely alone. And it becomes increasingly apparent as Gotham gets turned on its head over the course of the film. Each and every one of these relationships, these meetings Bruce has with this colorful cast of characters, are wake-up calls, opportunities for him to change, to become something more than a husk of a man who secretly hopes each night will be his last. As Bruce and the Batman are pushed to their mental and physical breaking point, they need to confront this, to decide if they will change. Decide if they want to help Gotham and carry on the Wayne family legacy, or if they'd rather entrench themselves forever in a fruitless campaign of self-destruction. Choose between an emotional crusade of vengeance or a systemic assault on the cancers of Gotham. Choose between isolating himself in darkness and becoming fully something else, or letting people into his life at the risk of feeling human again. Choose between the vengeance he is known as or the hope he could inspire. A choice between life and death. He's given a chance to use the tool that caused him so much suffering as a way to save the innocence of the city that he calls home. So that's how I feel about the Batman. I'm a pretty big fan if you couldn't tell. This is a briefer section where I'll touch on the more usual aspects of my reviews. Overall, I really love the plot and how The Long Halloween was adapted. Like I said, it's no whodunit, but you're along for the detective work, not the resolution to the mystery. There's an amazing cast of characters that all play off one another brilliantly. Pattinson, Farrell, Kravitz, Totoro, Serkis, Dano, and Wright are all a joy to watch in their roles. They bring together the iconic parts of their characters with their own personal spins, and everyone nails it. Gotham is a genuinely disgusting, alive city with seedy and creepy inhabitants. The aesthetic of Pattinson's Batman is rough around the edges, coming into his own. You see it in his suit, in his absolutely fantastic Batmobile, and in his personality and demeanor. The shots are all inspired, everything feels so intentional, and you just really sort of understand everything as it's happening and unfolding. From the layout of Gotham itself to the reason a certain shot for a scene is framed a certain way, it all feels like one cohesive vision. From somber moments alone with Bruce, to the lively action sequences that feel larger than life. There is some beautiful stuff on display in this grimy and gritty city. It's a very dark film, but it makes you appreciate the way that Matt Reeves and Greg Fraser play with the light and the color whenever it is there. The neon lights all over the city, the LED lights in the center of Gotham, the origins of fires and sunrises. All of it looks amazing against the dark silhouettes of the landscape and its residents. Special effects and visuals were all top-notch. Things felt like they really hit and had real weight to them. Even the sound design was great. I could feel my brain vibrating when the Batmobile accelerated, and it was just like being a kid again in an IMAX theater. My criticisms of the movie are lame, but are as follows. I didn't love the original score by Michael Giacchino, or however you say his last name. He's usually really great, but at some moments the score felt like it was too much of a thing on itself, and not simply elevating and connecting with the film in one cohesive audiovisual output. It could briefly distract me at certain points. I will say in isolation, almost every track he composed is amazing though. Just not clicking as well as it could be with everything else maybe. Also, I wish I got to spend a bit more time with the relationship between Alfred and Bruce. There's some real emotion there as a lifelong found family. I think another scene at the end or around the final act of the film would have been perfect, but it's nitpicky. Finally, I wish there were more moments of Batman being a stealthy and ninja-esque sort of presence. You get his detective work, you get his tenacity and anger as a fighter, but the sort of stealth that he's known for is a bit lacking. That felt missing in a few moments that I think could have really benefited from it. In closing, I rated a 4 out of 5, or maybe even a 4.5 out of 5. It's really everything I could have asked for, and is a great story for a character as big as the Batman. I'm excited to see where things go in the future, and I'm sure I will be seeing it again at some point. Until next time.